needed, but it's not sufficient on its own. We need proper investment in education of young people and in inspiring young people. And it's a job both for the scientific community. We've got to take our own responsibility to tell young people more about what we do and to inspire them on issues like climate change. But it's also a job for the government and for Mr. Blair and for the Chancellor. They've got to invest more heavily. The reason there are, as we've just heard, a quarter of schools have no physics teacher is because the physics graduates that we produce can earn huge salaries doing exciting jobs in the city and elsewhere, and teaching just can't compete with that. So it's a job both for the science community and for the government.
And when you say that to people in power, do you get any sense that that has been taken on board, that that investment might have to be looked at again?
Well, the Prime Minister is entitled to take credit for the fact that investment in science has gone up quite a bit during his premiership. But I asked him after the speech whether he thinks, for example, we've got the funding package right in the universities. Quite a few universities are talking about closing science departments. And he said he thinks we need to look at that again. So there is some mood of reception there that he is prepared to look at these things again to make sure we can get them right for the future.
Dr. Peter Cockery, thanks very much for your time. British Airways says the airport terrorism alert in August cost it £100 million, more than the company had predicted. BA says its pre-tax profits for the 3 months to September were down by 27%. Tom Simons is at Heathrow Airport. Tom.
Yes, Jane, when the flow of people and planes in this place starts to get disrupted, well, the bills for the airlines in particular start to mount up. There's compensation, hotel bills, extra fuel bills, and of course, lost bookings. Now, British Airways has been very badly affected, and the security situation still isn't back to normal. On Monday, the security rules change again. Liquids are allowed in small quantities. It might mean more delays as staff and passengers get to grips with the change.
There's no communication among you lot.
Who do we listen to, please?
British Airways has had some difficult summers. This was its worst. Despite the cost of the confusion, it did manage a profit, though long-haul bookings remain depressed. The airline's chief executive, doing the rounds this morning, told me the security restrictions were justified, at least initially.
I think it was disappointing to see that they remained in place for so long. We would have liked to have seen a return to the carriage of hand baggage much earlier. And equally, we would have liked to have seen passengers being allowed to carry liquids a lot earlier. But I have to, welcome the fact that that is now being reintroduced.
But industry watchers believe BA may have lost valuable business to continental rivals.
Those customers are looking for convenience more than price, so as long as they get a good service, they'll pick the most convenient option, which until recently was British Airways, but they were moved away from British Airways because of the problems they faced at security in the UK.
In turbulent times, British Airways can't let anything drag it down, so it's lopping off the loss-making BA Connect service, which links Britain's smaller airports, and selling it to the regional airline Flybe, which is tentatively hoping to turn it around.
Of course there's a risk. Taking a business on of this size, there is always a risk. But we've looked at the risk. We actually believe there's less of a risk in many ways by substituting these routes, bringing those routes into Flybe, as opposed to trying to develop 30 aircrafts worth of new routes ourselves.
Flybe says any service cuts will be minimal. The details of the deal still need to be thrashed out. The announcement is a further sign BA is streamlining its business, concentrating on its strengths: long-haul, full-service air travel. The message, no frills flying, is still not for us. Now, BA still has another big headache, and that is the huge deficit in its pension scheme. It's negotiating with its trustees and with the unions, but it has a problem. If it pushes too hard in those negotiations, it might end up with an industrial dispute. And if it doesn't resolve the situation, well, then it can't actually order any new aircraft, which it said it wants to do. So as we approach Christmas, this airline still has a lot on its plate, Jane.
Tom Simons, many thanks. The time is edging up to 17 minutes past 1, our top story this lunchtime. Record numbers of people are spiralling into debt. Insolvencies are up by 55%. And coming up on the programme, what happened next? We'll have the story of how a simple trip to the petrol station went horribly wrong.
Coming later on BBC London. The folk opera Porgy and Bess hits the London stage as a musical, and as the finishing touches are applied to the capital's 2 new super stadia, we look at how the players get a perfect pitch to perform on.
The armed forces are at least 5,000 short of the numbers they need. The National Audit Office says the forces have been below strength for the last 5 years. And one problem in getting new recruits is obesity. 2/3 of 16-year-olds in Britain are too fat to be accepted. Mike Sargent reports.
Britain's armed forces are feeling the strain. Deployments in Afghanistan and Iraq have put extra demands on manpower and resources. According to today's report, the military has been operating beyond its planned levels for more than 5 years.
I think today's report by the National Audit Office is actually very fair. It does seem to identify the things that many of us have been commenting on now for several months. It's not the fact that the armed forces are overstretched as such. I think they're running hot is probably what you'd call them. But to me, what's important is that you identify where there are things that could go wrong in the future.
At the moment, shortages appear most serious in the Royal Navy and in the Air Force, with particular problems highlighted in a number of specialist areas, including nuclear weapons. Watchkeepers, the engineers on Trident nuclear submarines, are 29% under strength. Royal Air Force weapons systems operators are 50% down. The medical services are worst hit. More than 2/3 of emergency nursing posts are unfilled. Thousands of men and women are leaving the services every year, although many say that's not because there are too many missions. And the government also insists that recruitment levels are rising.
Well, we're hoping in the next few years that we'll continue to see continual improvement in terms of the recruitment overall. And again, it's important to point out we're looking at incentives and ways of dealing and interacting with people where we've got shortages, and that's what we're going to continue to do.
The recruitment challenge is made more tricky by poor levels of physical fitness among young people in Britain. Today's report said that 2/3 of 16-year-olds were considered too fat for a military career. But according to ministers, joining up is one of the best ways to get fit fast. Mike Sargent, BBC News.
And let's talk to Andrew Brooks. He was an RAF pilot for 30 years and is now a defence analyst. Andrew Brooks, do you see any way out of this extraordinary shortfall? Because this has been going on for many years now.
And it's going to get worse because the shortfall is in actually the specialist trades. For example, communications people who have to go every time you go overseas. These sort of people don't grow on trees and they're eminently employable outside. So unless the government throws good money at this in terms of conditions and service, we're going to lose these very good people. That's market forces.
Is it just money? Is it someone thinking it's a pretty grim job being in the army sometimes? They look at Iraq, they look at Afghanistan. Would it help simply to pay them more? Could it be that easy?
No, it isn't just that easy, but it's got to be respect. I mean, people coming back from Afghanistan don't feel that they're getting the respect when they come back. They don't feel their wives are being looked after while they're away. If you get sent to Afghanistan, your wife probably has to give up her job to look after the kids because you're away. The system doesn't pay for that. And all this package of respect, conditions of service, all the things that go to make morale high have got to be addressed.
And increasing numbers of people leaving early as well. More than 9,000 going before their period of engagement was over last year. So the forces are losing some of their best people, presumably.
Yeah, the people who you really need, and these are the specialists, be it nuclear submarines or communications experts or linguists, are all eminently employable. And of course, their wives and children and their lifestyle are saying, you'll do it once, you might even do it twice. But if you keep pushing me every year to go back with no break in between, I have to jump, and that's human nature.
Andrew Brooks, we must leave it there, I'm afraid, but thank you very much. Thank you. The Old Bailey has been shown video footage of an Islamic demonstrator apparently calling for the death of British and American soldiers in Iraq. The pictures were taken during protests at the publication of cartoons depicting the Prophet Muhammad. Mohammed Rahman is accused of telling fellow protesters that he wanted to see blood running in the streets of Baghdad. He denies incitement to murder and stirring up racial hatred. Our correspondent Andy Ty is following the case. Andy,